So welcome everyone. This is Paul Newell, and I'm here with Raymoku Smith. We are the facilitators and founders of the King's College Divine Masculine series. Welcome to this Uncovering Masculinity, yeah, buddy. Uncovering Masculinity series. This is the first of many to come. And in this one, we are addressing fatherhood. Before we check in, if you could explain what is the purpose of King's College DMS before we go any further?
My pleasure, brother. The purpose of King's College, the Divine Masculine series, is encapsulated in our motto. Our motto is reclaiming the wholeness and humanity of the Black masculine psyche. As Black men, we are aware that there are very powerful sociological, cultural, and legal forces in existence which shape our identity, many of which do not exist for our benefit. So we come together as Black men to define ourselves for ourselves. And essentially what we do is radically interrogate and deconstruct the cultural blueprints and psychological conditioning that may keep us locked in immature and or dysfunctional behavioral patterns. And through our various workshops and our coaching program, together we co-create a new blueprint for mature masculinity and mature personhood, and support each other in being accountable to ourselves for this new standard.
And so it is, and so it is, and so it is. Thank you, Raymoku. So as we go through, some of the key things that we're going to highlight is, first of all, from the King's College Masculine series, King's College Connection Divine Masculine series, there's basically several things that we do within the King's College. We have a King's College Connection where men that are in the King's College from past sessions, past cohorts, they can stay connected, have valuable conversation, also have ongoing conversation about what's going on in their life, what's happening for them, and how they're integrating the knowledge that they've learned from King's College. We also have King's College Patreon page, which is a landing space to learn more, everything that we have going on about King's College. There's also different membership tiers to receive specific information. And then also to support the mission that Raymoku just stated, we do have King's College Coaching. The reason why we're talking to you about this now is as we go through this material going forward, there may be some things that open up for you that will give you the opportunity to take advantage of one of these and really explore the definition of the mature Black masculine psyche. The next slide that we're going to go to, we're going to take a moment and we're going to reflect. We're going to play a little game called First Words. All right. Now, how this works, man, is I'm going to say a word, give space, and in that space, I'd like men to claim or call out what are the first 1 to 3 words that come to mind when you hear the word I state. All right. So again, I'm going to state a word. After I give space after that word, I invite you men to call out the first 1 to 3 words that speak to you about that word. All right, you guys ready?
Ready.
Let's do it. All right, first word. Fatherhood.
Abandoned, sad, and wanting.
Thank you. Raymoku, anything come for you?
The first word for me is responsibility. The second word is That's the main word that comes up for me when I think of fatherhood. I think that encapsulates the essence. It's a huge responsibility.
All right. Well, fatherhood for me, difficulty, challenge, inspiration. That's what comes up.
Oh, my word is challenging.
Challenging.
Head of the household.
Word. All right, man. Thank you for that. Second word, Black fatherhood.
Absent, conflict, less than.
Bless up. Thank you, brother.
As for me, when I think of Black fatherhood, or rather the first things that come up, absent, needing of reform, which I own as a judgment, and influenced by many different sociological factors that are not of our own creation. So not our own.
Our own. Thank you. Blessings. Lies. Abandon. Bullshit.
Misunderstood.
Mine would be education.
Now, next word, last phrase. Absent Black father. I got lies again.
Pervasive. The standard.
Broken, heartless, coward.
Mine is media stereotype.
Over exaggerated.
Thank you, man. Breathe, man. Let's breathe that in for a moment. So, man, what we're about to get into right now is the history of Black fatherhood. Now, when we go through this here, when we were doing research for this, and actually as we came to this topic, we noticed that there were some significant things that came about in these different time frames. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to go through, we're going to do a little review on what are some of the things that has contributed to the standard or contributed to the propaganda of Black fatherhood. All right. And we are going to start off back in 1619 when slaves were brought to the New World. Okay. Remoko, can you dive into this slide for us, please?
You got it. So when in men, you will learn this about me, that I value language and I value the specificity of language. And I encourage you all to think very critically about the terms that we've used to describe our enslaved ancestors, and even the words that we use to describe ourselves, because the language that we use reinforces identity constructs, right? So 1619 was the first year that an enslaved African was brought to the New World. And what that signified was the destruction of the way in which our ancestors related to kinship. So extended families in villages, social fatherhood, shared responsibility amongst the community was eliminated. Our connection with our ancestors was eliminated. So what that does psychologically is it wrests our identities from us, right? That was the beginning of fatherhood as we knew it. That's the context for our lived experience. Of course, it wasn't the beginning, but that impact still continues today, right? So from that destruction came the injection of normative, white, patriarchal, Judeo-Christian values into Black families, right? And it's really even hard to say Black families because families were wrested from one another, right? So these dates here, 1619 to 1760 to 1840 and to the present day, mark four distinct qualities of fatherhood, right? The first one is the father as the moral teacher. Okay.
So hold on,
The
Remoko. I want to save that for when we get to like the villages versus the families.
Okay.
Because like when you say that they're wrested away, like so this part right here, when we talk about the new slave, the new world and the slave mentality, this is really the implementation of or the start of injected systems imprisonment. Like we were imprisoned. Now,
right.
one of the things as we go forward, the thing that happened while we were in this imprisonment is we were bred for profit. So as Remoku stated, as we were wrested away from our families, Black men and women were sold to breed for labor. So plantation owners could sell slaves or sell enslaved Black men and women and have them bred. Like in stories that we read and research that we did, Black men were often shipped to different plantations to have sex with different women and create new slaves, more labor for these slave owners. One of the things that Remoku stated, which is important to note, is again, they were wrested away from quote unquote a family or their unit or whoever they were with when they were here or whatever they got close to. Really in that time, like relationship was almost unheard of because it was basically Black men and women were labor. They were enslaved. Now, the thing that happened is part of this trauma and part of this programming and conditioning also included humiliation of Black males, also known as buck breaking, where Black men were sodomized in front of communities and made to feel less than in order to break the community and also break other men or discourage other men from doing anything outside of what the slave owners wanted them to do. Part of this also was breeding contracts where women were granted freedom if they had 15 kids, which is crazy. And this is what was happening. Now, part of this breeding scenario is that even when we talk about from the fatherhood perspective, like really there was no quote unquote fatherhood. It was really sperm, right? Or creating different labor forces for money, right? So these systems were breeding Black men and women, or Black men in this case, to be more labor for their plantations. And in a lot of situations, especially when there was like slavery abolishment, a lot of these things were happening in different places to, again, help with labor. Now, also part of this breeding for profit was slave owners, white slave owners would also breed with enslaved women, because this was a way for them to get lighter skinned slaves so that they can have more house laborers, and also sell off lighter skinned women for prostitution. And also slave owners' wives would also have sex with Black men for breeding. Now, taking this back to this enslaved system, you'll notice that some of this language is also some of the things that are used in pornography to describe any type of interracial sex or interracial types of scenes where Black men are having sex with women, or actually with any women, or regardless of the color, they call it breeding.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Now,
Also, when we talk about the period of slavery, there's just a couple of things I want to point out. Let's call the beasts by their true names. So when we refer to our ancestors who were enslaved, let's say that they were enslaved instead of slaves, right? This is a very small difference in language, but it has a huge impact, because this language separates a person's identity from their circumstance, right? Our identity was not slaves, right? We were enslaved. It was something that happened to us, right? The other thing is when we talk about the enslaver versus the owner and the master, right? We still see some of this more antiquated language happening today. So the usage of owner or master empowers the enslaver, right? And dehumanizes the enslaved person, thus reducing them to a commodity, right? Rather than a person who had slavery imposed upon them, right? When we speak of plantations, we really should call them forced labor camps, right? That's what they were. When we speak about enslaved people who ran away, I've noticed that there's a tendency to call them fugitives, right? They're not fugitives, they were freedom seekers, right? The term fugitive evokes the image of a lawbreaker who requires capture and punishment. So freedom seeker illuminates what was in the hearts and minds of those acting to make freedom a reality. Okay. So at this point, we want to talk about some of the differences between Afro-Indigenous familial structures and the nuclear family. We are clear that the nuclear family structure was enforced upon us, right? And if we existed in communities in which we were able to rely on extended family for support, then that would change some of the expectations that come about with these parental roles, right? There's greater ability to rely on extended members of the family for support, and there's less pressure on the two parents to provide for the family itself, right? So if you really think about it, the structure of the nuclear family itself defines the expectations for fatherhood, right? If we're living in this industrialist capitalist society, then there's naturally going to be that expectation that the father is supposed to be the breadwinner and the provider. Honestly, from my perspective, that's a lot of pressure, right? And my belief is that by sharing the responsibility of child rearing, the child has a greater connection to a sense of kinship and a more expansive sense of self, and also a connection to ancestral lineage, right? Which is something that reinforces a child's sense of self-esteem, right? Whereas as opposed to these nuclear family units, which are really cut off to a great extent to the ancestors, right? I would venture to say that most of us really only have a connection to our grandparents and nothing beyond. And that impacts our sense of self, our sense of self-worth, our sense of belonging, and also the wounds that come from um, just growing up in a family.
So I want to check in for a second on something, because like I think this is a very important thing for us as Black men to recognize. In our cultures, as Remoku said, we are a village, we're a community, we come together. I don't know if it was like this for some of you men, but I know when I was younger, because my mom and dad knew different people in the community, if they weren't around, people in the community would be telling on me. They'd be watching over me. They make sure like, yo, get your ass home. I know your mom doesn't want you out here past once the street lights are on. Did anybody else ever have that type of scenario? Maybe it's just me, right? Okay.
Definitely.
So,
Me.
yep. So that's an example, right, of it's more than the parents are raising the child. What Remoku was talking about here is very important. If you look at, there was in the Industrial Revolution, there was a separation of families and a selection of units which bred competition. So in this instance, when we have this family unit, it set the standard for shame. Because in most cases, like how it was in how mothers and fathers would be in the fields working. The grandparents and the village would take care of the children. Just like how we see in this image over here. How many boys, how many men are there? You have these older men, these elders in front, guiding these younger men in the tribe. So there was always a system of support for the masculine. In the family structure, there's only one. There's only one. So if there is fails to be a father in the family picture, that family's broken. That's the narrative that was created. Now, Remoku, before you're about to go into some things from there was a UCLA law report, a law review by a gentleman, Omar, failing to recall his last name. But Remoku, you mentioned that there, what's it?
Rambert, Omar Rambert.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And man, we're going to be sending you resources of articles after the presentation. So there's going to be articles that are going to reinforce what we're telling here, what we're talking to here. Remoku, you're about to dive into some of the levels or some of the things that Omar had discussed in that review, right? You're about to do that before I cut you off. Can you go through that now?
Absolutely, absolutely. Here's what Rambert has to say about that very thing. So he says, scholars note that the social concept of fatherhood has evolved through 4 phases. 1 is the moral teacher. 2 is the breadwinner. 3, the sex role model. And 4, the loving father. He goes on to say, but while the notion of social fatherhood has evolved, a father's ability to economically sustain his family still survives as the fundamental measuring stick for a man's familial success. Okay. He also says that in the beginning stages of colonial America, fathers were generally presumed to teach their children good work habits and faith in religion. So during that time, there weren't many factories and large industrial structures that promoted a more breadwinner orientation. Most people during that time were working on farms in their homes, right? But by the time that the Industrial Revolution rolled around, there was this shift into a breadwinner orientation. So this shifted in the post-Civil War era when the American economy grew, as it became more acceptable for men to take jobs outside of the home compared to working within the family business or agriculture. And then finally, the increasing importance of literary works also influenced fatherly expectations, putting more significance on loving one's child, sharing acquired wisdom, and spending quality time. Now, with all of that being said, the fundamental measuring stick, just like I said before, of a father's involvement and worth, quite frankly, in society for a Black father, for fatherhood in general, is that monetary contribution.
And Remoka, you said it was the moral teacher,
Mm-hmm.
breadwinner,
Yep.
and the sex what?
Role model.
And what's the last one?
The loving father.
So I want to check in with you, men. You could check in through the chat before we move on. Which one of these roles would you say, first of all, would you say your father played? And if you're a father, which role would you fit in these categories? And you can put it in the chat or you can speak it if you like. It's up to you. For me, I'm gonna go with moral teacher, breadwinner, and yeah, I'll go with those two for right now.
So
My dad was more on the tough love aspect of life, so he was definitely more of, make the money, take care of your family. But for me, teaching the kids the morals, being a breadwinner and trying to be a loving father. I got 3 girls and a boy, and girls require a lot more. So trying to be that loving father also.
All right. Thank you, Anderson. Red, you were going to say something?
Really quick, though. I just have a quick question, something that came up from your comment, brother. Could you clarify what you mean when you say that girls require more?
More upfront attention, petting, caring, hugging, more emotional. So requiring more of that upfront hands-on, hands-on is probably not the way to say it, but more of an emotional caring, more so than a boy. Obviously boys need that as well, but more so emotional and trying to put yourself as a role model for what you want them to bring home to you.
That comment makes me it makes me grateful that we're here having this conversation, because my want is to really take some time to call into question, to inquire into. This is an invitation for you, to invite you into some inquiry around the assumptions that you've shared with us around what boys and girls need. My own experience has been that those same factors existed in my household, and what I wanted more of from my father was nurturing, was attention, was hand holding, was play and cuddling. And my honest opinion is that if Black fathers don't show that type of love to our sons in particular, that they're missing out on a very important point. They're missing out on, one, a very important relational aspect with their fathers, and also, just generally speaking, some love. I don't know if you view it the same way, but I'm just curious to know, how that resonates with you. And
Well, I wouldn't want to give the impression my father didn't show me any love at all. That's definitely not what I would want to portray, or that boys don't require the hugs and the petting and the kissing and things like that. I have a son as well, so he'll tell you that I kiss him now. So, and he's 27 years old. So, that he doesn't like it, but I do it anyway. So that my father was just, more of a gruff exterior, and it was more of a pat on the back and than an actual hug and hand holding, and more, old school manning up and being tough and things of that nature. But through that, I still felt that of his love and nurturing in the way that he knew, because that's the way he was nurtured and that's the way he was brought up on the farm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I gotta say, so as we're discussing this, what was coming up for me is, especially since this is about Black fatherhood, is there, considering what we're talking about, like especially with enslavement, these systems, these imprisonments. I wonder if, because it's something that I'm experiencing, like Remoku, this reflection you have, I'm reflecting on myself. And I'm wondering, like, there may be a tint for Black men and Black sons of creating a tougher exterior because of what we've endured. Where it's as if there's that separation, if I'm too attached, it's going to be tough to separate. This is my talk. I'm talking about myself, first of all. So I know this is something that for me, with my sons, it's like, especially my oldest son, I wanted to make sure he had this toughness about him, right? So it's like, it prevented me from really getting closer to him in a certain way. And when I recognized what was happening, I was like, wow, man, I'm like really pushing myself away from him so this kid can isolate and like learn how to grow. And at the time, I'm like, this dude's only 6 years old. He doesn't know about these things yet. So this is one of the reasons why I'm happy. Milka, I'm with you. I'm happy we're having these conversations, because some of the things, just like how we did in First Words, there's some conditioning that is in us to treat things and to treat our sons or daughters, maybe whether a certain way or different ways, or based on what we grew up with. And I think based on the people that are on, based on the men that are on the call, and knowing you men, Steve, I know, like I've sat in a circle with you a couple of times. I think it's like we're taking this information that we may have gotten from our fathers, and we're adjusting it to who we are and creating something different. So I just wanted to state that and put that out there. Steve, I wanted to check in with you. Out of these, because I heard from Anderson and Red, out of these, which one would you say you fall into out of these categories?
I think I come from a different paradigm, because I grew up with no father in the household at all as a kid or a young adult. So I had no father. Gotcha. So that in kind made me, when I did have my daughter, I wanted to overcompensate and be everything that he wasn't to her. So all of the 4 things that you mentioned, I kind of wanted to be, more than compensate. I wanted to definitely be a great breadwinner, very loving, very close to her, in kind relationship, just educate her on just the principles of life, and make sure that she has a better understanding of the relationship, and just be a better father than my father was to me. Now, I think, but to the challenge with that is that just to give Black men, and I tell Black men this all the time, there's no textbook on how to be a great father. So fathers don't know what they should do or what they should not do, especially if they didn't have a strong father in their household. Right. I was kind of blessed at the fact that on the first floor, I had a very strong uncle. So I got good ideas from him, but based on the textbook definition of what a good father was, he may not have been a great father either. But I always give Black men the benefit of the doubt, because I assume that if they knew better, they would do better. So it comes, like when we talk about the difference between the village and the family, I tell young men when I speak to them, I think they got 2 role models. It's you got to provide and you got to protect the family. Yeah. Because I speak to so many people, and especially men, and they're destroyed because their lack of relationship with their father. Like I grew up in Newark, East Orange, so it's pretty common that, I wouldn't say common, but a lot of Black men didn't have their fathers at home. So it's kind of like we all gravitate, we're all just out here just trying to find our way. And it's even more prevalent now today in America because of the fact that we have nobody to, you know, like I told some boys recently, I said, listen, you know, when we're younger, we have all these people around us. So we have all these men around us to teach us how to start, but there's nobody there to teach us how to finish. So subsequently, we're lost. And that's why you'll see brothers acting. I got friends that are big time executives and still cry about the loss that they did not have because their father was in at home, or they didn't think that their father treated them properly, or they felt that their family abandoned them. And I know for enslaved times, what happened was that we didn't get too close to each other because we didn't want to get broken when the slave master took us away from our families.
Exactly, bro.
It was kind of like a detachment kind of philosophy there. But that being no longer the case, but we still have that same old mindset. Yeah. So that's just my 2 cents. I don't want to take too much time, but
yo, this is why we're having a conversation, brother. Speak on it, man, because this is what happens, right? And I think, like you mentioned something key we touched on, this imprisonment, this enslavement, because there was this possibility that this is going to happen, it closed us down.
Yes.
Like you said, like, it's like, whoa, man, look, we could be parted anyway, so I'm out. Like, I'm not going to get too close because I don't want to be hurt and like all these things. So when we look at that, like, when we look at that mentality that Steve just said, right? This sets the stage, especially when you talk about things like epigenetics, trauma. Trauma can live on in generations, right? And what we're talking about here is what, like 400 something years ago, right? This is what, like 4 or 5 generations, 5 or 6 generations, right? These are things that men may have taught their sons, or again, more is caught than taught. So when we look at what, Steve, what you were just saying, and Anderson, what you said, and what we're all saying here, as we move on, this is when, well, now that we've understand like this village versus family concept in that industrial age, in 1965, there was a man, Daniel Moynihan, right? And Daniel Moynihan created this report called the Negro Family. I'm actually going to pull this up here so we can take a look at this, right? Now, in this report that this guy put out, while he may have had, I don't know what his intentions were, and actually what his intentions were to really boost the civil rights movement to start to work on inequalities. So what happened is he created the Negro Family, the case for national action. And again, his thing was, again, to address the inequalities, but this became a very controversial report because some would say that it showed about the inequalities in the family structure, right? And some would say that, you know, this is advocating to alleviate race-based economic inequalities, because a lot of his report was about the Black family and absentee fatherhood, okay? Now, some also would argue that this was the only racial self-help could actually produce the necessary changes in the family structure. So while this man may have wanted to address inequalities, people saw his data in different ways. Like, they looked at it like, well, listen, the Black man is not at home, so that's on them. Like, it's like the term pull yourself up by the bootstraps. But what really came up is, like, he started this data and looking at it as raw data, free of judgment. This really talked to what's happening in the family structure in these Black communities. Now, when you look in the center of this screen, it may look a little bit small, but this is the non-marital birth rates in the United States, okay? Now, when you look at this chart, that purple line along the top, that's for the Black population. So if you look even at the start of it, back in, and look when it started, right? It really kicked off in close to 1970. Well, what the heck happened around 1970, Paul? Well, I'm glad you asked. that's when a lot of these systems started to come into place that reinforced a separation of Black families. Now, why the separation? Well, as we go into it, systems like the child support system, okay? What happens here in this, and this is where a lot of Black men can get tripped up. And I'm speaking from experience here because I'm in the child support system right now. And the thing is when you're in arrears, the child support system can enforce and wipe your bank account clean. Okay, hold on, innocent. They can wipe your bank account clean. They can also wipe away your investments. They can take your tax return. They can also put liens on assets, suspend driver's license. Now, the thing is that this creates a deficit in income for men. So when we talk about this family structure and creating, like, if fathers aren't in the household, Remoku mentioned something before. Back in these days, because there may have been little work in the Black communities, Black men were displaced, leaving families with single mothers. Now, one of the things that happens right now is a lot of these systems that are in place are enforcing or are encouraging more single family households. Now, one of the other systems that's out there that also encourages this is the welfare system. Say, Remoko, you want to talk a little bit about this?
Absolutely. And I just want to add in just a few comments about Moynihan and the cyclical structure that you began to speak about. If you could just go back a couple slides, please. So Moynihan, why is this particular report so significant? It's significant because this is basically the origin of the Black father stereotype, okay? So basically, so I'm going to read you just one quote from the Moynihan Report. He says in it, "The Negro community has been forced into a matriarchal structure, which, because it is so out of line with the rest of the American society, seriously retards the progress of the group as a whole and imposes a crushing burden on the Negro male, and in consequence on a great many Negro women as well." So basically what he's saying here is that he's blaming the disadvantage of the Black community on the breakdown of the Black nuclear family, right? Specifically the desertion of the Black father and the preeminence of Black women at the heads of households, right? So that's basically where this narrative of the absent Black father takes root, okay? And just like Paul said, there are cyclical legal structures in place that reinforce the perpetuation of the Black father, right? So it starts with the Black father not being present in the home, right? Due to, and influenced, of course, by the social construct of race, right? If the Black father is not present at home, then the child support enforcement system kicks into gear, right? Then the child is fatherless and the father is deemed a deadbeat. That has implications both on the child's sense of identity and the father's sense of self, right? And then there's the potential effects of crime, education failure, and poverty, which once again leads to the Black father not being present in the home, right? So there is a cyclical structure in place that is supported by the legal system, right? So that's what I wanted to say about the Moynihan Report. Going into welfare, there are a couple of laws that I want to bring to your attention. The first one is in 1974, the Child Support Enforcement Act created the Federal Office of Child Support Enforcement and required welfare beneficiaries to transfer their right to receive child support payments from the non-custodial parent to the government. This is huge. This is huge. Afterwards, there was the Omnibus Budget Reconciliation Act of 1993, where it was noted, and Rambert quotes, the first step in securing child support is the establishment of paternity. The importance of determining paternity can also be seen in the Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Act of 1996. So when a mother receives both welfare benefits from the government and child support payments from a non-custodial father, the government then tries to get some of that welfare money back, right, that it distributed by collecting part of the child support payments made by the non-custodial parent, right? So immediately there's this connection made between child support and welfare, okay? This act also strengthened child support enforcement procedures by allowing states to withhold a biological father's income, like Paul said, to suspend his driver's license or professional licenses, and also place liens against his property, right? So ultimately what this does is it pits his interests against that of the government, because a lower child support award signifies less money for the state recoup. Right? So ultimately, what this brings into question is child support state incentivized? This is the question that Rambert brings up in this article, right? And ultimately, at the end, he suggests some reforms of this system. Okay.
So I want to take the opportunity here to really check in on this, because when you're looking at this slide on the screen, in alignment with what Remoku is saying right here, this comes back to the breeding concept. Okay, Black men breed, government gets money. Imprisonment systems, the imprisonment systems gain capital. So what is the incentive to support the Black household, to support more Black men coming into the household? Now, here's the thing that I want us to bring awareness to while we're reading all these stats, and as you look over the years, the increase in the percentage of Black children raised by one parent, you see that based on the welfare system. I want to bring to light something that we also found is that these systems, these statistics, are looking at the Black male living in the home with the child and are failing to talk about the engagement that the Black man may have with the child. So why I bring that up is because that part of the engagement, the Black man engaging with the child, is rarely, if ever, stated. Because again, this is pushing the propaganda. Steve, I believe you said media stereotype of the absentee Black father. All right. Now, when we look at this here, for example, these are all these systems that have been put in place in alignment or also in tandem with media projections, stories, images, songs, TV shows. If you think about Maury Povich, You Are the Baby Daddy. Baby daddy and baby mama is some enslavement language, because they never knew who sometimes they may not know who the father was because they were bred. So this is the thing we want to, this is the thing we're looking to upend. So as we've gone over this, I want to check in. We're going to do another round of first words. But this time, as we do this, I want you to think of, if there's, as we state these words again, I want you to check in with if there's something different that comes up for you, and if there's a feeling that comes up for you. And if so, where is it? All right. So we're going to go through this round again, then we're going to check in. So first words, the first word that we're going to talk to, fatherhood. What's the word or feeling that's coming up for you when you hear the word fatherhood now? Fatherhood. What word
Feel
or
free to
feeling?
unmute yourselves and just throw it out there.
Okay. What word comes up? What word or feeling comes up for you when you hear Black fatherhood after you heard what we just went through? Okay. Now, you'll put it in the chat or you'll speak it out. Now, what is the word or feeling that comes up? Oh, Steve, do you have something?
No, I think mine are the same.
All right,
As I said,
cool.
yeah.
Cool. Excellent. So this is basically, okay, this is great. And absentee fatherhood, is there a different feeling or word, or is there a feeling or a different word that comes up for any men? So if we think about this based on the silence, it seems like my assumption based on especially what Steve was saying is, I'm thinking that all the words are the same. So what we've already thought about fatherhood, Black fatherhood, absentee fatherhood has been supported by these trends, this history, this journey of Black fatherhood. So now we look at that. Let's start to create a different blueprint. So before we do that though, I know when we first checked in and also checking in with Red before the call, Steve, I know you mentioned that you had some thoughts, guidance around being a Black father that you wanted to talk to. So I'm going to open up the space for you to share that. And then Red, you mentioned after that, if you're open to it, I want to invite you to share. You said some things came up for you this week as a father. So I wanted us to, if you two men could share, and then we're going to move on from there or add in any comments that come up. So Steve, I'm gonna, if you can unmute and then speak to your experiences, man, as a father, because you spoke to some of it. If you could speak to more, that'd be great.
Yeah, I think, well, first and foremost, I think fatherhood is pretty much the greatest gift a man can give as far as establishing his legacy. Without that legacy, where would we be? But to the major degree is, I really think it's this, and the depths of the pain of Black fathers, especially when they put the man against the woman, is kind of it's systematic. It's very contradictory relative to what Black men actually want. It gives the assumption that Black men don't want to be close to their children, that they pride themselves on being this kind of like just out there gigolo kind of man with no substance, no morals, no integrity, just out here making babies. Right. When the men that I come across are contrary to that. So what they feel and what the media feels, as depicted on various news programs and various reports, shows a different type of man than what I'm accustomed to. So when we talk about Black men in particular, to a certain degree, I see a certain degree of strength, but then it becomes it's a lack of education, like I said, because no one has taught us how to really be a strong father unless we get the role models from our existing father or a grandfather or somebody in the village that we can model, like an uncle or a mentor or a coach. So there's a void there that I think that needs to be created. So not only do I want to present the problems, I want us as a group to identify solutions on how we can resolve this issue so that we can put a voice out, and maybe something to come in the future where we can put a voice out, be a seminar, a webinar, where we instruct Black men on how to do things like this. Because I'm telling you, they're not encountering conversations like this because there's men don't really have authentic relationships. Women have authentic relationships. They'll go and say, girl, let's go out for drinks and have dinner. And then they'll talk about it. Right. Men, our philosophy is, you good, I'm good. You know what I'm saying? It's like, there's no depth in that relationship. The guy can be a child molester, he can be beating up his wife, domestic violence, but I ran a conversation one time with Prudential, which they sponsored, and we spoke, and we brought these real models, men into the group. And men had talked about, in a closed session, the attempts about, even based on like what they're going through. So some even mentioned like domestic violence, suicide, trying to slit their wrists, and just not being comfortable in the space that they're in. But who's there for them to talk to? Because for them to go to counseling is perceived as being a weakness.
Right.
So that's another thing we got to consider. So we got to create a space where if a person is, like I talk to men all the time. So like even today when I was at church, I was talking to the guy, I said, listen, you good? I said, no, not the BS part. I'm talking about the real, are you real good? And he said, yeah, okay. So that's what the meat and potatoes is, that we as brothers who have some sense of about our being, our integrity, and what we should be doing. Not saying our way is the only way, we're not monolithic, but men are out there and they need us. Yeah. They're screaming out for us. If you talk to any man that's going, I don't care. I got friends that are vice chairman for major corporations, and they tell me about the challenges they go through in this life. So everybody needs somebody. Right. So I just hope in this group can speak to that. Yeah. Thank you.
Yes.
Blessings, man. Blessings.
Yes. I would like to speak to that some. One thing that I would like to see changed in interactions amongst Black men, and of course, I must be the change that I want to see in the world, and I am doing this very thing. And it often puts me in rather uncomfortable situations, right? But the real work is done on the day-to-day and not just in events like this, right? My want is to be very intentional with the questions that we ask. So, for example, rather than asking a man, are you good? Right? I leave it open. How are you feeling? How are your heart and spirit today? Where do you feel that in your body? What's coming up for you right now? What stories are you telling yourself about that? What judgments do you have about this? How can I support you? How can I show up for you? How can I hold space for you? If you need a compassionate listening ear, I'm here. Right? So I would like to see a shift from, you good, you okay, which is it, what's the word that I'm looking for? The way that the question is framed has an implicit expectation built into it, right? If I ask you, you good, that's sort of prompting them in a way to say that you're good, right? So that shift to the more open-ended questions, I think, might benefit. It's benefited me in my conversations with men, for sure.
Yeah, I appreciate what you said, Remoko, and Steve, thank you for bringing your statement. That's one of the reasons, like what you said is one of the reasons why Remoko and I created the King's College Divine Masculine series, because we think that there gets to be an education for Black men on how to manage and navigate life in this collective white belief system, because there's stereotypes and propaganda on how we're supposed to show up as lovers, how we're supposed to show up as fighters, as alchemists, as sovereign beings. I mean, like, if you think about lovers, like, yo, okay, I can bet a lot of women, right? Is that really a lover though? That's a stereotype. And when it comes to education, like Remoko, yeah, I do agree with everything that you're saying about the questions. And also, I think based on what I heard Steve saying in my experience, having that space to have the open-ended questions and conversations, because there gets to be a trust factor in this space. Like how when we came in, we have ground rules, right? It's like, oh, confidentiality. Like Red and I, we facilitate a BIPOC a container for men. And because we create that space for men to be themselves, that's when the education on things like, Steve, I think to answer your question, things like self-awareness, which we discussed, which we're about to get into, tapping into internal wisdom and reservoirs and resources, what that looks like, getting a unique blueprint of how we show up, because each Black man, while we go through very similar struggles and challenges, we do show up differently, each one of us. And the piece of us connecting, especially with that common question, you good? No. And I like, Steve, what you said, like, no, fuck, okay, past that other stuff, like, are you good? Like, that's how we do in Jersey, Remoko. That's, yo, you good? No. You good? And it's that eye look, right? Like, and Steve, you know what I'm talking about. It's like asking a deeper question, right? Because there's like, and it happened to me today, like at work, because I saw dudes, I saw he was struggling, and I was like, hey man, something's off today. You okay? I'm just checking in. Like, what's up? He's like, no, everything is good. Everything is good. I was like, okay, listen, man. You can say that to everybody else, but for me, let's go off to the side. Tell me what's really up, because something's off. And he proceeded to tell me what was going on. And I think that's why when we have spaces like this, especially for Black fathers, because I've experienced a lot as a non-custodial Black dad, it's rough out here. So us having these spaces is critical. So I think for education, that's part of it. Tapping into internal resources, tapping into knowledge of self, and tapping into like how we connect, how we trust.
Yes.
I want to check in, Anderson, Red. Any other comments on this before we toss it over to Red? Because I want to hear what happened with Cameron for you this week. Check it in. Any other comments on Steve's?
No, all good. All good. Okay. Fulfilling.
See, he's from Jersey too. He said, I'm good. He's from
Jersey.
See?
Yo, Anderson is from Jersey. That's right.
Born and raised.
That's right. Yep.
No, I think, Paul, one of the other things that I forgot to mention is, I think we as a people, some things we've learned and we kind of accept them for being truthful and factual, but based on now we get new information, so now we got to make new decisions. So what we've learned, now we have to unlearn and then relearn what the actual truth is as we evolve through this thing called life. So things that we learned, like the way I was understood to be a man, was growing up and being in the college fraternity and all that stuff. You wanted to be a player, you wanted to see that you had a lot of, but as I evolved through this life, I know that's not fruitful for me, either short-term or long-term. So now I have to unlearn what I learned when I was in my teens and when I was in my 20s and 30s. Then I had to unlearn, so that took me a few years, and then I had to relearn exactly what it takes and really to be a good father, not even a good father, a great father, a good man, a good husband, a good boyfriend, just a moral component to this community that we're amongst, and even in our own village. So we have to break that down a little further. So I used an analogy. I spoke to some college kids last week, and I told them the story, and they kind of, because it gets into that self-image, self-awareness component that you talked about.
Yeah.
So I told them a story about this young man. He had this. He was at work at his desk, and his kid kept bothering him. So he said, "Well, just like it kept giving him things to do, and he kept coming back." So he said, "Well," then he saw this picture of the world, and he took this picture of the world and he ripped it up, and he said, "Well, come back to me when you fix this problem," assuming that the kid would take him about at least a couple hours to fix the picture because the picture of the world. Yeah. The kid comes back to him in like 3 minutes. He said, "How did you do it so quickly?" He said, "Well, Dad, on the back of the picture of the world was a picture of a man. When I put the man together, the whole world became together."
Yep. Bless up. I love that story. I love that story, man.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful.
It is.
And it reinforces this point that I really want you men to internalize is this event isn't just about our future generations. It's about you. It's about you becoming the conscious father for yourself that you may have never had, And as we shift into this blueprint, this visualization that we'll be doing momentarily, really think about your own personal experiences. What sorts of experiences might you want to have with your father? Or what do you want for yourself now as the conscious father for yourself?
Yeah, this is great, man. Yeah, let's go. Let's go into that meditation. Before we do that, I want to give a couple minutes to Red. Red, did you want to discuss what came up for you this past week, or you want to wait till after the visualization,
man? Up to you,
man. Yeah, if you could just give us a little insight on what came up for this week, because I think it's going to be helpful for you to bring that up before we go into the visualization.
So I've been living in the shadow of two truths, but I only knew one, and that truth is that there's nothing I want more in the world than to be a father. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense for my life, but there's this conflicting truth that I just found, and it put so much of the last 15 years of my life into perspective. And that truth is, which is, I own it because it just makes sense. I don't want to be a parent. And I looked the first time I said that, I was like, "Oh, where'd you get that?" Well, it's another jewel that my father dropped on me in his absence and choosing to not be my dad. So my mother taught me the truth of I'll do anything for my kids because she raised us, and she did it. I mean, blood, sweat, and tears, kicking and screaming. So that's how I learned how to be a parent. And then the realization that I didn't, my daughter was conceived. I was in a blacked out drunk. There was no conversation with her mother about having kids. We weren't even in a relationship. I mean, it was physical. So, I look at the behavior I've deferred to her and submitted to her for most of these years, and what makes all of that make sense is the fact that I didn't want to be a parent. It was like anytime I would just let her take my daughter and keep her as long as she wanted to, it was because I was happy to have my time. I was happy to have my freedom. I was happy to be the selfish man that I could be, that my dad taught me about, because I judged the difference between a parent and someone who's made a child is a parent temporarily gives up selfishness and through the proper rearing of the child gets it back a little bit at a time as the child gets older. But the parent who chooses selfishness never parents. So the truth, it's like a two my two truths are on opposite sides of a coin. And I own them both. I mean, it fits. And it helps me understand the conflict I've been having all these years with, man, just let it go. Nah, don't fight. Nah, man, let it go. Don't fight. And then the times I would fight, that was me wanting to be the parent I deserved to be and my daughter deserved to have me as. And all the other times when I would just submit or succeed to her was me feeding into the truth of I don't want to be a parent. And I've never had, never given myself the time to truly think about whether I wanted to be a parent any of the years before I became a parent. So who knows what the conversation or what the conversation with myself may have ended as had I had that conversation prior to doing it. I may not be a father right now. That's a possibility. And I may be happy in that space because I sure as shit am happy in that space when I lean into the truth of I don't want to be a parent. I'm just as happy as when I lean into the truth of I want nothing more than to be a parent. Yeah. So the self-awareness and this understanding of myself, it really brought, it's like I found another room, another door to open to get to know myself better. And it's interesting that I keep finding these rooms and these doors and these places. And, I shared it with a man and he asked me, he said, man, say more about it. And I said, right now, all I can say is I found the room, I got the door open and I'm looking for the light switch. I don't know what's in there, but it helped me to understand a lot more of myself and my behaviors around my daughter and her mother and all of that. So that's my realization. It's like, man, and it doesn't, I don't feel bad. I don't feel like it makes me less of a dad. It's just another fact about me. It's just another truth. Like I said, it's a shadow. Both of them are shadows. I live in the shadow of both of those truths. I want nothing more than to be a parent. I can mistreat myself in the shadow of parenting. And I don't want to be a parent. I can mistreat myself in that shadow as well. So just the plot thickens. Thanks for listening. I'm in.
Ashay, thank you, brother. Thank you.
And that's
Bless
great.
You,
Can I speak to that a little bit, Paul?
Sure, man. Yeah.
What's your name again? I'm sorry. What's his name again? Anderson?
Red.
Red. Hey, Red. Bro, I'm gonna tell you, to be honest, I was in the same predicament. I met my daughters, I was just coming out of my marriage, and I met my daughter at this club in the city. We got into some things, and within like 30 days, she calls me up and tells me she's pregnant. Man, I'm telling you, bro, I was at the top of my game, bro. I was out in these streets. Man, I was killing it, bro. I was at all the right parties, going to the right places, New York, New Jersey, all over the place, bro. And then then it just broke it down, man. And then I said, dang, I got this daughter, man. It's like, it's like slowing my roll. It's like, I'm coming out of a relationship with my ex-wife, who's gorgeous, loved her to death, even today. And then I got this relationship with this other young lady who I just had a baby by. And I was like resented it, man. I was like beating myself up, man. I was challenged by it. I said, man, what's going on? But then I got this call, right? My daughter was in this school in Hoboken. So it was like Parents' Day or something like that. No, it was Father's Day. And the school calls me and they say, your daughter's here crying because she said she misses her dad and she doesn't see him that much. Bro, I'm at work. I break down like a freaking faggot. Well, excuse me, don't say, I shouldn't say, I just broke down. And it was traumatizing. You know, it broke me down, bro. And it's nothing worse than you to be, and you had a girl in the 3rd grade or something, and she loves you so much that she's in her school crying because of the fact that your cold-heartedness and your selfishness is not allow you to reciprocate the love that she's extending you. Bro, that was an epiphany. That was a wake-up call for me. Even today, bro, it's like my daughter's 28. Bro, she talks like me. She's as funny as I am. Bro, they call us twins. Like, it's like Dumb and Dumber. Bro, we are so tight. Bro, we are so tight, bro. It's incredible. I'm in finance. She just started her own investment firm. It's like, bro, and I'll tell you what's even funnier than that. I got invited to her mother's wedding as her guest.
Wow.
Now, you can imagine how people looked at me when I walked in this place. I'm going to her mother's wedding as the baby daddy. So the only thing I can tell you, bro, is keep the faith, because it's going to be something that's going to give you an insight to what the overall purpose of this. I'm telling you, man, my daughter, I can't tell you, my daughter has been such a blessing to me. I'm telling you, I tell people all the time, I didn't know how to love until I had a daughter. Because my father wasn't there. So my mother tried to overcompensate and be mother and father, straight out of, Newark, trying to overcompensate, no father there. So she'll kiss you one day and then you get the worst whooping in the world. Like, bring me my daddy, like she would just beat me up all the time. So I think what you're going through is, it's an evolution, bro. It's something that we grow into. And if I can give you any rules of optimism, I hope my story gives you like any rules of optimism, hope, faith that this thing will come to you eventually. But don't give up hope, because that relationship with your daughter is so critical. Because your daughter is going to measure the type of man she marries based on the way you treat her.
So I'm not sure how you heard what I said, Steve. I appreciate everything you said.
No, yeah, I know what you're saying. Yeah, but I'm just saying,
I don't need hope. I don't need faith. I don't need to figure anything out. I've already figured out what was necessary, and there's nothing wrong with this truth. I'll own it. I don't want it to go away, because then I'll be missing a piece of me that's very intricate to my being.
Right.
What I want to do is just find the ins and outs of it so that I can use it to serve my mission.
Right.
And that exists. I just got to do the work to find it. This doesn't impact my relationship with my daughter. It doesn't impact my relationship with myself outside of the space of, I know me better now.
Right.
So yeah, man, I appreciate it, but I don't need words of encouragement around this, because it's not discouraging to learn more truths about myself.
No, and that's what, and I found truths within myself during the process. My process wasn't exactly the same as yours, because no process is exactly the same. True. But it was somewhat similar. So that's why I wanted to engage you in the conversation. I'm sorry if I apologize if I kind of made an analogy that you wasn't hopeful or speaking to your truth. But I'm just trying to pretty much explain to you my circumstance. And then hopefully as brothers can come together and have a meeting of the minds And then if not for you, for some other brother that we can speak to and just give testimony to the power of the relationship of being Black fathers. That's all I'm saying.
So true. Because I tell you what, Steve, what you said resonates for me. Because I'm in a situation that you had times two. Because I got divorced, I was separated, and that's when I went to bed with someone, and then I had my second kid. Yeah. Then thought that I had it all worked out down the road, and then I bedded with another woman that I thought I was going to be with for a while, and that was a train wreck, and I ended up having another kid. So I'm like, it took me a while to get this piece of fatherhood down, free of the shame. And that's where I see where Red was saying resonates, because there's two truths here. And like, for me to navigate, I had to learn. And I think that's where the knowledge of self is, because like I was coming from a place of guilt and shame, because I thought like, oh man, I'm just like how my dad was. And I'm different. I made mistakes, but I allowed those mistakes to beat me. I allowed those mistakes to be the bat to beat myself up. And I think that's a place, especially when we have these conversations, whether it's from Red's perspective or Steve, you sharing yours, I think more Black men get to hear this conversation, more Black fathers, because there are Black fathers out there that are alienated from their children. Because when it comes down to it, I mean, the truth is the Black seed is a commodity. Like my first kid is biracial, and I can't tell you how many kids are like, people are like, oh my God, I love biracial babies. And there's no family structure to say, well, hey, this is how it's done. It's more just like, this is what I want, I'm gonna go get it. Forget this dude over here. He just gave me the seed. He's not really a father anyway, because the theme has been perpetuated. That's why this Black fatherhood is serious, man, because we get to create what mature Black fatherhood is for each of us. And that means we're pulling out a quality that's in us, that's unique to anyone, that's far from common to anyone else. So I want to I want to pause. Remoki, you said you had a comment, right? Before we go into that quick visualization.
Yes, just a quick comment. One of the things that I'm hearing in your stories, man, and thank you for sharing, is that you didn't plan on being fathers to a great extent, right? And as a gay man, as an androphile, someone who's attracted to masculinity, I had a conversation with my own father about this, and whether or not I will choose to be a father, because I'm not sure yet. But one of the things that came up in my conversations with him is something that I consider to be a blessing in disguise, especially for him, in that because I'm a gay man and I only interact with men, I can never run the risk of having a child by accident. And thus, fatherhood will always be a conscious choice in my life. And I think that's the gift, is that it is a chosen experience. And if I do decide to have children, then they will never have to think, well, was I a mistake? Was I intended? They'll always know I chose you.
That's true.
Rainbow, I appreciate what you said there, and I agree, but at the same time, I judge that my daughter's understanding is, no matter how she was conceived, through my behaviors towards her, I've always chosen her as well. Because sure, that it's twofold. Conception is the first choice, presence is the second. And the way I see it is women get a 9-month head start in connecting, because when the baby's born, the mother has to choose to continue the connection or break it. And as the external piece, I get to choose to start it or let it go. And I chose to start it, and I've chose to be in it as often as I've lived the truth of wanting to be a father.
Mm-hmm.
So thanks for that. Thanks for saying that, because it is true. I did not give myself the choice in the intentional in the beginning, but I stand in the choice that I've made and continue to make every day to be a dad.
Yes. And I think that makes all the difference. Yeah.
True.
Thank you.
Let's breathe, man. Let's breathe. Oh, Steve, you had something?
No, I was just agreeing with what he was saying. He doesn't have, whereas, one has one opportunity, other one's another. But, I just think either way is acceptable to me. I think children are, if you decide, if you don't, I'm saying that I just consider them just blessings, man. I don't even care if it's like right now I'm helping my girlfriend's son whose father who stayed with me, not even my son, and I stayed with him, and I took him all around, taught him how to play basketball, AAU camps, everything. He's not even my son, but based on my relationship with my daughter, I'm kind of like extending that to him too. So it's making me making me a better man, I think.
Bless up, man. Bless up. Thank you for that, man. Thank you for that. Man, so I know we have till 7. So what I'm thinking is like I do want to I'm thinking, because I want to honor this time, I'm gonna record the visualization and send it out to you men. And the thing is, because I'm gonna pivot here because I want us to continue having this conversation via email, and we have some invitations we want to bring you men into to really continue this conversation, because while it's 5 of us here, this is a conversation that can outreach to more men. And when it comes to why we created King's College, this is about defining this for this conversation. This is about defining mature Black fatherhood and looking at like what that means for each of us, right? So I'm gonna record this conversation, or I'm gonna record the visualization, and then I'm gonna have you men with the visualization. I'm gonna send it out to email to all of us, and I want us to chime in as to how we responded to the questions that are gonna be in the visualization. And there's going to be a couple things. We're going to be sharing the video and the audio of this conversation, and we invite you to share it. If you like the conversation, what we discussed today, what came up, then we invite you to share this with other Black men, other Black fathers specifically, or anyone that's holding father energy, because to hold father energy, you could be free of having a physical child, right? So that's something that we got to remember. And that's something that happens also in the Black community, where if a father isn't there, there is some sort of masculine figure that may be there, that may be providing that model for a young boy or girl, or young man or woman. And yet they fail to see or fail to recognize the impact that they have with that father energy. So we want to expand that. So the invitation that we have for you, men, before we start to check out, and thank you all you men for the comments, is what's next? So Remoko, you want to go through some of the things that we have all open for as far as King's College?
Absolutely. So as we know, man, the work lasts for a lifetime. It happens in our daily lives, and it also happens in the containers that we create for ourselves. And within King's College, the Divine Masculine series, we've created something called the King's College Connection. This is a bi-weekly connection. On one week, it happens through the Clubhouse app, and any man can participate. And then on another week, we have a private Zoom link where we can go a little bit deeper, do a little bit deeper work. We would love your support for us through Patreon, and there are various tiers. You can choose how much you would like to contribute. King's College is an L3C organization, so it's in between a for-profit and nonprofit. Our main goal is to touch the lives of men. Our goal is really not to accumulate a lot of money. And so, this is part of our livelihood, and we're looking for it to become a self-sustaining organization. We have clear plans and visions for what we want to do. So your support is very much appreciated. And also we have the King's College Coaching, which is an opportunity to do some deeper one-on-one personal work with me and Paul as your facilitators. And we bring some lots of skills and modalities to the forefront. Paul can speak to his modalities. I come from a Zen background. I've been trained in this for the last 12 years. I've been doing men's work since February of 2014. I'm a shadow work coach. And so, I'm really inspired to be present for men in their personal development work. And I enjoy it. And this is the life that I've chosen. So if any of these options appeal to you, please sign up. We'll put the Patreon link in the chat, and we can go from there. But we want you all to continue to be involved in King's College as we grow and expand and continue this work, because quite honestly, it can't happen without you.
Bless up, man. Bless up. I'm actually going to put the King's College Patreon page. One thing to note, man, the King's College Patreon page, whether you're aligned to any of the membership tiers or not, it is our landing page for now. So this is going to be the place where you're going to be able to you can get free content. You're going to learn about when our calls are for the connection. Also, when we are going to be on Clubhouse. So highly recommend that you stay tuned and tap into that. So as we get to the 7 o'clock hour, we're going to start our checkout. So Remoku, while I get that Patreon link for us, can you start the checkout for us, please?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So for the checkout, all we would like is your name and what insights did you get from today's event? And I'll start off. Remoku. The Black experience is not a monolith, neither is Black fatherhood. And as Black men, we bring a wealth of diverse perspectives that contribute to our collective well-being, that challenge some things that we take for granted. And what is clearer more than ever is that we are stronger together. We are stronger when we are actively present and supporting one another in our own interpersonal journeys. And that is my checkout. Man, I'm so honored to have been present with you all today and guided you and listened and learned from you in this conversation. And I hope that you will continue to be involved in the King's College. And with that, I'm out. And I will pass the torch to Brother Anderson.
All right. Thank you, brother. Appreciate it. On my check, Anderson, just the perspectives, even with the numbers we have here, whatever you think of the amount of the numbers, a lot of insight into where we come from, how we got to be fathers, where our own fathers came from, just the different aspects of being and becoming in this fatherhood and Black fatherhood space was opening. It was enlightening, and uplifting in a sense. So for me, I definitely want to keep in touch. I want to keep in contact. I want to get more involved. And we as men and Black men, regardless of the masculinity aspects that we were all taught in our backgrounds, we have to get more in touch with ourselves to be the best fathers, husbands, etc., boyfriends that we can be going forward. And I'm out, and I'll pass on to Rhett.
Thanks, Anderson. So, what am I taking? I'm taking, oh, this is red. And I'm taking some more self-awareness and the understanding that being a father fills my heart, but it also triggers me to the understanding of how much I wish I had a father. So as I show up for my daughter, I always have these thought addendums of, man, I would love to experience that from my dad. So I am a constant reminder of how sad I am to not have had my dad to the capacity that I am available to my daughter. And that sucks, man. And you know, it's a what do I do? What do I do? And just speaking it and being witness to that, I appreciate you, man. I've thought that for a while, but I wanted to try to see what it felt like to say it. And yeah, I'm sad. But I'm grateful to you, men, for showing up, and you, Remoku, and Paul, for creating this space. And I heard you mention more spaces, so send them, because I need them. And I'm out. And Steve, take what you got, bro.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate it. My name is Steve, and I think the three takeaways I have is, first, based on the conversation we had today, is optimism. Being optimistic about the direction of where we can take this as fathers and how we can educate others. The second thing is, and what I appreciate for every man on this call, is their vulnerability. Meaning that they're vulnerable to conversations, vulnerable to, thinking differently, and vulnerable for just seeking help in this space. I think that's one of the big things that I encounter, and I've encountered it as myself, is how can I be more open, vulnerable to a better idea, a better thought, even a better direction for my life. So I think that's one of the things. That was the second one. The third one is community. There's such a major need for what we're talking about.
Yeah.
In our community in particular, because men are not having these conversations. I can tell you, I'm in probably one of the largest Black fraternities, and masculinity, our first cardinal principle, is manhood. And we work that thing like it's, if you're not manly, you're going to be kind of ostracized. So how do you address the issues when you have these pains? They say men cry in the dark. And I just feel that there's so many men that spend their nights up late at night just asking why and how can they resolve the issues that they encounter, as not only as fathers, but as men in general. So those are my three components: optimism, vulnerability, and community. And to that regard, I'm out. And I guess I'll pass it to Paul.
Bless up. Thank you.
Real quick, you just mentioned a fraternity. You must be an Omega if you mentioned the principle of manhood.
Yes, sir.
Nice, nice. I'm a Sigma.
Oh man, deepest sympathy, bro. Sorry to hear that. No, I'm just kidding. No, man, all my boy, I got a lot of good friends in the Sigmas, bro. A lot of good. I was just with them last week, man. A lot of Sigmas, bro. That's good stuff, man.
All love, man.
I'm just, you know, it's D9 love, bud. D9 love, bro.
I already know, man.
Don't worry about it.
Much love.
All right.
That's hilarious. My deepest sympathy. Yeah, I love that. Well, I think my biggest, Paul, checking out, man. My biggest takeaway is what we just experienced. Like, we can have deep conversations, and we can have humor. We can have lightness. Because for us to really dive into these conversations as Black men and with other Black men, I think both are necessary. Because it gives us the opportunity to expand our range. It gives us an opportunity to expand our language. It gives us an opportunity to expand who we are. Dive into the crevices, dive into those spaces where we tend to shy away, or I'm going to speak for myself, where I tend to shy away, and be in a space that's supportive and supported by other men that look like me. So I'm ecstatic thank you, man, for showing up. And I know that this recording is going to go further, especially as we're going to be sending this out to you all tomorrow with some other resources and articles, and also with the visualization that we have planned for today. I'm disappointed we didn't get to do the visualization, and I'm encouraged and in hope that we had conversation like we had, to be heard, to express what's real for us as fathers, or express what's real for us in this father energy, because it is important. And for us to guide and teach younger brothers that are younger than us, that may be on the verge of experiencing what we've experienced, that we can support and help them out as well. So thank you, man, for showing up. This has been a gift for Remoku and I. And we're looking forward to seeing you, man, on another King's College event. Stay tuned. All the links that you need will be coming tomorrow. And also in the chat, there is the patreon.com page for King's College DMS. Please bookmark that page. And we will be adding you all to our email list. So again, when any new events or happenings are going on, you all will be notified. Thank you, man. It's been a gift and a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, brothers. Be well.
Thank you, man. Have a wonderful night. Take care of yourself. Until the next.
Thank you.
Blessings, man.